I never imagined that a bond one thought unbreakable would shatter so completely, leaving me questioning everything I once held dear. It began, as so many things do, with hope and promise. I was married to a man I loved deeply, a man I believed would always be by my side, through thick and thin. And then there was my sister, Claire, whose presence in my life was as constant and comforting as the sunrise. At least, that's what I thought until the secrets began to unravel like a thread pulled from a tightly woven tapestry. In the early years of our adulthood, life seemed like a perfect painting. I had met Daniel at a friend's birthday party, and his warm smile, his gentle manner, and his unwavering dedication to his dreams captured my heart almost immediately. We built a life together with quiet rituals, Sunday morning breakfasts, long walks in the park, and whispered conversations late into the night. Every moment was filled with an intimacy and trust that I had never known before. Even as I reveled in the bliss of my marriage, my relationship with my sister was a pillar of my identity. Claire, 3 years my senior, was my confidant, my best friend, and my safe haven. Our childhood was spent in a small town where everyone knew everyone else. We were inseparable, and our parents' occasional arguments never came between us. When I married Daniel, I assumed nothing would change. After all, the love we shared as sisters was resilient enough to withstand the inevitable tests of time. Yet, as the years passed, subtle shifts began to take shape. I recall the first inklings of unease, a lingering look exchanged between Claire and someone at one of our family gatherings, a secretive tone in her voice when she answered the phone late at night. I dismissed these moments as figments of my overactive imagination, convinced that nothing could ever come between us. It wasn't until later that I realized how desperately I had clung to that belief. It started innocently enough. I noticed that Claire, who had always been fiercely independent, was suddenly spending more time away from home. "I'm just meeting up with some old friends," she would say with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. I assumed that she was simply exploring new opportunities or perhaps rekindling relationships with people from her past. But in the back of my mind, a seed of doubt was planted, one that would eventually sprout into a thicket of pain. Daniel, ever the attentive husband, noticed little changes in me too. He'd ask if everything was all right, and I'd brush it off, saying I was just tired or a little off-kilter from work. I kept my concerns bottled up, determined not to burden him with something so trivial. After all, I thought, marriage was supposed to be a safe space where one could hide away from the world's cruelties. I never suspected that the true storm was brewing on the horizon. One evening, as I was returning home from a late meeting, I found myself standing outside our modest house, my heart pounding against my ribcage. The living room was unusually dark, and a single beam of light escaped from beneath the door. My instincts told me something was amiss. I pushed the door open slowly, half expecting to find Daniel asleep on the couch, but instead, I was greeted by an eerie silence. In the dim glow of the hallway lamp, I noticed a shape, a figure leaning casually against the back wall. It was Claire. For a moment, I was frozen in disbelief. What was she doing here at such a late hour? Her eyes, red and swollen as if from tears, met mine, and I saw in them a mixture of desperation and guilt. "I'm sorry," she whispered, as if the words could mend the chasm that was opening between us. But I couldn't understand. Why would she be here? My mind raced with questions. Before I could gather my thoughts, she continued in a trembling voice, "There's something you need to know about Daniel." In that moment, everything changed. The very foundations of my carefully constructed life began to crumble as Claire's confession unfolded in agonizing detail. She admitted that she had been drawn into a whirlwind romance with Daniel, a secret affair that had blossomed under the guise of friendship and shared moments of vulnerability. The revelation was like a poison that seeped into every fiber of my being, staining the memories of our once perfect life. I felt as if the ground had given way beneath me. My mind swam with disbelief, my heart shattered into innumerable pieces. How could the man I loved be capable of such betrayal? And how could my own flesh and blood, my sister, my confidant, be involved in something so destructive? The room spun around me as I struggled to process the enormity of what Claire had confessed. For hours, I sat in silence, torn between fury and sorrow, anger and disbelief. The conversation that followed was a blur of frantic, stuttering words, each one deepening the wound that had been inflicted upon me. Claire's eyes brimmed with tears as she explained that the affair had been a mistake, a lapse in judgment that had spiraled out of control. "I never intended for it to hurt you," she insisted repeatedly, her voice thick with regret, but her words did nothing to soothe the storm raging inside me. I couldn't help but replay every moment of my marriage with Daniel, searching for signs that I had missed, hints that could have alerted me to this betrayal. Was that lingering glance at a family gathering a clue? Or the way he seemed distracted on weekends when he was supposed to be with me? Every memory became tainted, every smile now a painful reminder of trust that had been shattered. As I confronted Daniel later that night, his expression was one of profound sorrow and remorse. He admitted to the affair with a quiet, almost defeated tone. He confessed that he had fallen into a dangerous trap, one that began innocently enough but quickly escalated into a web of lies and forbidden passion. The conversation was a torrent of accusations and apologies, each word ripping away at the remnants of the life we had built together. I listened in numb silence, feeling as though I were a spectator to my own downfall, powerless to halt the cascade of events that had been set into motion. The days that followed were a haze of shattered dreams and relentless despair. I found myself drifting through life, each moment punctuated by the gnawing pain of betrayal. Friends reached out, their voices gentle and full of concern, but I could not bear the pity in their eyes. Everything had become a painful reminder of what had been lost: the promises of a happy marriage, the secure embrace of sisterly love, and the belief in the sanctity of family bonds. Yet, as I attempted to navigate the wreckage of my heart, an unexpected twist emerged. Claire, the very woman who had unleashed this catastrophe, began to seek my help. It started with hesitant phone calls and tearful letters, her words dripping with regret and desperate pleas for forgiveness. "I've made a terrible mistake," she would say, her voice trembling with emotion, "and I need you to help me make things right." The irony was not lost on me. The one person responsible for my heartbreak now wore the guise of a victim, pleading for rescue from the consequences of her own actions. I recall the first time she came to our home after the revelation, a frail, shivering figure at our doorstep, soaked from the relentless rain that seemed to echo the tumult in her soul. In that moment, I was overwhelmed by a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Anger and betrayal warred with a deep-seated compassion that I had long tried to bury beneath the rubble of my shattered life. I didn't know whether to welcome her into our midst or shut the door forever, sealing the wound that threatened to bleed beyond repair. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Daniel, too, wore the burden of regret, his eyes a mirror of his inner torment. The silence that hung between us was a living, breathing entity, one that mocked the promises of our past and foretold a future marred by loss. As Claire began to recount her version of events, her words were a mix of remorse and raw honesty. She spoke of loneliness, of feeling trapped in a life that offered little more than superficial comfort. Her affair, she explained, was not a calculated act of betrayal but rather a desperate grasp at something more profound, a fleeting taste of freedom and passion that had lured her away from the safe confines of her marriage. Her confession was punctuated by moments of intense vulnerability. I saw in her eyes the haunted look of a soul tormented by her own choices. She admitted that the affair had cost her dearly, leaving her marriage in ruins and her spirit bruised beyond repair. And yet, here she was, pleading with me to help her salvage what remained of her life. "I'm begging you," she said softly, her voice cracking as she clutched at my hand. "Please, help me find a way out of this mess. I don't know who else to turn to." In the days and nights that followed, I was caught in a relentless tug-of-war between my love for my sister and the instinct to protect myself from further pain. Each time she called, each tearful visit, dredged up memories of betrayal and ignited a spark of fury deep within me. I found myself oscillating between a desire to forgive and a desperate need to hold on to the fragments of my identity that had not yet been tainted by deceit. It wasn't merely the affair that devastated me, it was the realization that the person I had trusted most had been capable of causing such irreparable damage. The wounds inflicted by her actions extended far beyond the dissolution of my marriage. They seeped into every corner of my being, infecting my thoughts and distorting my sense of self. I began to question the very foundations of trust, of love, of the bonds that tie us together. In the quiet hours of the night, as I lay awake in the dark, I wondered if I would ever be able to forgive, if the scars of betrayal could ever truly fade. The strain of these conflicting emotions manifested in every aspect of my daily life. Simple tasks became Herculean challenges as I navigated a world that now seemed fraught with hidden dangers. The once familiar comfort of my home had turned into a battleground where memories of happier times clashed violently with the stark reality of my present. Every room, every corner, held echoes of the past, a past that now felt irretrievably lost. In the midst of this turmoil, I sought solace in the written word. Late at night, I would scribble my thoughts into a battered journal, each entry a cathartic release of pent-up anger and sorrow. The pages became a refuge, a space where I could confront the demons that haunted me. I poured my heart out in long, rambling paragraphs, trying desperately to make sense of the chaos that had become my life. It was in those moments of solitude that I began to piece together the fragments of my shattered identity, to question whether forgiveness could ever lead to healing or if it was simply an act of surrender to the pain. Even as I wrestled with the overwhelming sense of betrayal, there were fleeting moments of clarity, a glimpse of hope that perhaps, in time, I could rebuild what had been broken. I remember a particular evening, a few weeks after the initial revelation, when I found myself sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of crimson and gold. The beauty of the scene was almost surreal, a stark contrast to the inner turmoil that raged within me. For a brief moment, the world seemed to pause, and I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for redemption. It was in that fragile stillness that I began to see the complexity of human frailty. I realized that neither Claire nor Daniel was entirely to blame. Each of us had faltered in our own way, making choices driven by our deepest insecurities and unmet needs. The pain of betrayal was not just about the act itself, but about the disintegration of trust and the loss of the future we had once envisioned. In that quiet twilight, I made a silent vow to seek not only justice for the wrongs done to me but also understanding for the wounded souls around me, even if that meant confronting the darkness within myself. As the days turned into weeks, the chaos that had once seemed insurmountable began to take on a different shape, a shape that hinted at the possibility of transformation. I started to realize that, despite the deep wounds inflicted upon me, there was an opportunity to rebuild my life from the ashes of my past. The path forward was fraught with uncertainty, and every step was a tentative exploration of uncharted territory, but the prospect of rediscovering my strength was enough to keep me moving forward. I began to establish new routines, seeking refuge in small acts of self-care, a long walk in the crisp morning air, a quiet cup of coffee savored in solitude, or even the simple act of watching the world go by from my favorite spot by the window. These moments, seemingly insignificant at first, gradually coalesced into a lifeline, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there was beauty to be found. Yet, as I embarked on this journey of healing, I couldn't escape the constant reminder of my shattered family. Claire's desperate pleas, her tear-streaked confessions, and the lingering sense of betrayal that clung to every memory were ever present. Even as I worked to piece together the fragments of my own identity, I was forced to confront the reality that my sister, once the embodiment of unconditional love, had been the catalyst for my deepest pain. In the quiet moments of reflection, I often questioned whether forgiveness was truly an option or simply a mask to cover the raw, unhealed wounds of betrayal. I wrestled with the idea that perhaps, by forgiving her, I would be condoning the actions that had led to my suffering. Yet, at the same time, the thought of harboring resentment felt like carrying a heavy, unyielding burden that would only serve to keep me tethered to a past I desperately wanted to leave behind. As I stand on the precipice of a new chapter in my life, I am painfully aware that the journey ahead is as uncertain as it is necessary. The scars of betrayal may never fully fade, but I have come to accept that they are a testament to the complexities of human relationships, a reminder that even in the midst of pain, there is the potential for growth and renewal. I know that there are many unanswered questions still lingering in the recesses of my mind. What drove Daniel to stray so deeply from the path we had vowed to walk together? How could my own sister, the person I trusted most, have allowed herself to be consumed by a force so destructive? And perhaps most haunting of all, how do I find the strength to move forward when the echoes of that fateful night still reverberate in every corner of my soul? For now, I have chosen to focus on the small victories, the moments of unexpected kindness, the beauty of a sunrise, the warmth of a genuine smile from a stranger. Each of these moments is a small beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the midst of chaos, there is still a reason to believe in the possibility of redemption. In this first part of my story, I have shared the painful origins of a betrayal that reshaped my entire world. I stand at a crossroads, torn between the desire to reclaim the life I once knew and the daunting task of forging a new path forward. The wounds are deep, the memories bittersweet, and the future uncertain. Yet, in the face of overwhelming darkness, I have found a glimmer of resilience, a fragile light that refuses to be extinguished. As I prepare to continue this journey in the next part of my story, I carry with me the lessons of the past and the hope for a future that, though scarred, may yet hold the promise of healing. The road ahead is long, and I know that I must confront not only the ghosts of my betrayal but also the lingering echoes of a love that was once unbreakable. I leave you now with the knowledge that this is only the beginning, a prelude to a narrative filled with twists, revelations, and the relentless pursuit of redemption. I am not sure where this winding road will ultimately lead, but I do know one thing: every step forward, no matter how painful, is a testament to the strength that lies within us all. The choices we make in the wake of betrayal define who we are and shape the contours of our future. For me, the journey has just begun. I still remember the overwhelming sensation of waking up each day to an existence that felt both foreign and unbearably familiar, a life that had been irrevocably altered by choices made in moments of weakness and desire. In the weeks that followed the revelation of the affair, the days blurred into a relentless cycle of raw emotions. I found myself drifting between moments of numbness and bursts of unbridled anger, unable to reconcile the woman I had once been with the shattered remnants of trust that now defined my every step. Every morning, as I forced myself out of bed, I was haunted by memories of a happier past, the laughter that once filled our home, the soft murmurs of contentment shared over quiet dinners, and the promise of a future that now lay in ruins. The silence that filled the empty spaces left by broken promises was deafening. I would wander through the rooms of our house, each corner echoing with ghosts of a time when life seemed simpler, when love had not yet been tainted by betrayal. In those moments, the weight of regret pressed down on me, making it nearly impossible to breathe. My sister's visits became an inescapable reminder of the duality of her nature. There were days when her presence stirred a deep, lingering sorrow, and others when her eyes, red-rimmed and pleading, evoked a reluctant compassion that I fought so hard to suppress. I questioned every word she uttered, every tear that slid down her face. Was she truly remorseful, or was her heart still tangled in the same web of lies that had once ensnared us both? I found no clear answers, only the continuous ache of a wound that refused to close. Daniel's remorse was palpable, a constant undercurrent in every strained conversation we attempted. He had become a shadow of the man I once knew, his eyes clouded with regret and his voice barely able to rise above a whisper when he admitted to his transgressions. Our interactions were marked by an unspoken understanding that nothing would ever be the same. Each time he reached out, hesitantly, perhaps in search of forgiveness, I recoiled, unwilling or unable to bridge the ever-widening chasm between us. His attempts at explanation felt like desperate grasping at straws, trying to fill the void left by actions that could never be undone. There were long nights when I would sit by the window, watching the world outside continue in its oblivious routine, even as my inner world crumbled. The rhythmic patter of rain against the glass became a metaphor for my own tears, each droplet a reminder of the cleansing yet unrelenting force of time, capable of washing away only the superficial layers of pain while leaving the deeper scars intact. In those moments of isolation, I would reach for the journal that had become my sole confidant. I poured my heart onto the pages in a frantic attempt to capture the chaos of my thoughts, to make sense of the emotions that surged like a turbulent river within me. In my writing, I revisited the past with a painful clarity, dissecting every conversation, every gesture, every glance that had preceded the ultimate betrayal. I reread old letters and mumbled promises exchanged in the quiet intimacy of our early days, trying to find clues in retrospect that might have warned me of the impending collapse. The act of writing became both a torment and a solace, a means to externalize the internal strife, to lay bare the vulnerability that I had long hidden behind a facade of strength. I wrote about the days filled with laughter and the nights spent dreaming of a future that now seemed like an illusion. I documented the gradual erosion of trust, the slow poison that seeped into every crevice of my soul until nothing remained but bitter residue. As time ambled on, I was forced to confront the harsh reality that forgiveness, if it were even possible, was not a clear-cut destination but rather a winding, treacherous path strewn with moments of relapse. My sister's pleas for help, though seemingly earnest, were interwoven with the very fabric of the betrayal that had undone my life. Each conversation with her left me oscillating between a desire to rescue the person I once knew and an instinct to shield myself from further harm. I began to see the complexities of our shared history, a tapestry woven with both beauty and pain, and recognized that the process of healing would require more than a simple act of absolution. It would demand an honest reckoning with the past and a willingness to embrace the uncertainty of the future. One particularly bitter evening, after a heated argument that had left our home trembling with the echoes of unresolved accusations, I found myself alone in the kitchen. The dim light cast long, wavering shadows on the walls as I cleaned the remnants of our shattered dinner, my hands trembling as I scrubbed away at the stains that were as stubborn as the memories they represented. In that solitude, I began to understand that the burden of forgiveness was not mine to bear alone. The realization that healing required not only the mending of a fractured heart but also the rebuilding of self-respect was a turning point, albeit one fraught with uncertainty and pain. I started to seek solace in unexpected places. Late-night walks became a ritual, a way to escape the oppressive confines of my thoughts and to reconnect with a world that continued to exist outside the storm of my emotions. The crisp air of early mornings, tinged with the promise of a new day, offered fleeting moments of clarity. On these walks, I allowed myself to remember the simple joys, a shared smile with a stranger, the vibrant colors of a sunrise, the quiet serenity of a park bench. These small acts of communion with life, though seemingly insignificant, became the anchors that steadied my resolve to keep moving forward. It was during one of these solitary walks that I encountered an old friend, someone who had known me long before the tangled web of familial betrayal and marital strife had taken hold of my life. His presence was a balm, a reminder that amidst the darkness, there existed pockets of kindness and understanding. We talked for hours on an old, weathered bench beneath a sprawling oak tree, our conversation meandering through memories of childhood and the bittersweet realities of adulthood. In his gentle words, I found a reflection of my own pain, a shared sorrow that was tempered by a cautious hope for redemption. His unwavering support helped me to see that, while the past could never be erased, it did not have to dictate the entirety of my future. Yet, even as I took tentative steps toward rebuilding my inner strength, the turmoil within our fractured family continued to simmer beneath the surface. My sister's behavior grew increasingly erratic, her attempts to reconcile seeming to vacillate wildly between moments of deep remorse and bursts of defiance. There were days when she would vanish for hours without explanation, leaving behind cryptic messages that hinted at an inner struggle far beyond the simple remorse of a guilty conscience. Her emotional volatility was a stark reminder that the path to healing was not linear, that the scars of betrayal often reopened in the face of new challenges, demanding renewed courage with each painful resurgence. One afternoon, as I sat alone in the quiet of my study, the rain pattering softly against the windowpane, my sister returned unexpectedly. Her eyes, haunted by a turmoil that I had seen before in my own reflections, met mine without the usual mask of contrition. Instead, there was a fierce, almost defiant spark in them, a glimmer of the person she once was before the affair and the ensuing chaos had left her so irrevocably changed. In that silent exchange, I recognized that her pain was as profound as my own, that beneath the layers of betrayal and regret lay a heart desperate for redemption. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, I wondered if the roles were reversed, if I was the one who had become too ensnared in the web of my own bitterness to see the person I had once loved as a sister in need. The conversation that ensued was raw and unfiltered, a torrent of pent-up emotion that spilled out in a rush of confessions and accusations. She spoke of her loneliness, of a sense of entrapment in a marriage that had never truly fulfilled her, and of the irresistible allure of a passion that promised liberation from her mundane existence. Her voice wavered between defiance and vulnerability, and I found myself listening not with the intent to forgive, but to understand the fractured soul that stood before me. As she spoke, I felt a flicker of empathy ignite within me, a recognition that, in our shared humanity, pain often led us down paths we never intended to tread. In the weeks that followed, our interactions grew increasingly complex. There were moments of tenderness, a shared laugh over a long-forgotten memory, a silent acknowledgement of mutual regret, as well as instances of bitter confrontation, where the past was dissected with surgical precision. I began to realize that our relationship had transformed into something unrecognizable, a delicate balance between the remnants of sisterly love and the relentless sting of betrayal. Each encounter forced me to confront the duality of human nature, the capacity to inflict deep wounds and the equally potent ability to heal, even if only in the faintest of measures. As I grappled with these conflicting emotions, I also sought professional help, finding that the objective perspective of a counselor offered insights that I could scarcely have achieved on my own. In the quiet intimacy of a softly lit office, I recounted my story to someone who listened without judgment, someone who helped me see that the journey to healing was not about forgetting the past but about learning to live with it. The counselor's gentle questions and thoughtful reflections challenged me to reconsider my narrative, not as a victim of circumstances but as a survivor, someone who had the power to shape the future despite the scars of yesterday. The process of therapy was grueling at times, a constant excavation of buried emotions that I had long tried to avoid. I was forced to confront the anger, the sorrow, and the profound sense of loss that had taken root in the depths of my being. Yet, with every painful session, I also began to rediscover parts of myself that I thought had been lost forever. The quiet resilience, the capacity for hope, and the strength to forge ahead even when the path was shrouded in uncertainty. I learned that healing was not a destination but a journey marked by small victories and setbacks, each moment of progress a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. In the midst of this internal battle, external events continued to compound my anguish. Rumors began to circulate in the small circle of friends and family, whispers of other indiscretions, of secrets too terrible to speak aloud. Each new revelation felt like another blow, a reminder that the web of deceit had far-reaching consequences that extended beyond the confines of our broken household. I watched as those I once trusted began to take sides, their loyalties divided by the murky lines of betrayal. It was as if the entire world had become complicit in the unraveling of what had once been a tightly knit tapestry of love and commitment. Despite the mounting pressure, I found that my perspective was slowly shifting. The constant barrage of negativity and accusations, while painful, also forced me to reevaluate what truly mattered. I began to see that clinging to the past, allowing it to define every aspect of my identity, was a choice that only served to deepen my despair. The act of letting go was not about forgetting the betrayal, but about reclaiming my power, about choosing to define my own future rather than being a perpetual prisoner of past transgressions. There were evenings when I would sit in the quiet darkness, the soft hum of the night punctuating my thoughts, and I would whisper words of forgiveness, not to absolve those who had wronged me, but to free myself from the endless cycle of pain and resentment. I realized that forgiveness was less about condoning the actions of others and more about reclaiming my own sense of peace. It was a slow, painful process, marked by moments of doubt and setbacks, but gradually, I felt a lightness seep into the heavy corners of my heart. One night, as the rain subsided and the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky, I found myself standing at a crossroads. The familiar pull of despair was there, urging me to retreat into the safety of numbness, but a quieter, more insistent voice within urged me to step forward. It was a moment of reckoning, a choice between remaining a prisoner of the past or embracing the possibility of a future that, though uncertain, held the promise of healing and renewal. In that fragile instant, I decided that I would no longer allow the ghosts of betrayal to dictate the terms of my existence. The journey ahead was daunting, filled with unknown challenges and painful memories that would undoubtedly resurface. Yet, I began to actively seek out the small joys that life still offered, a cup of tea shared with a friend, a walk in the park where the laughter of children served as a reminder of life's simple pleasures, and moments of quiet introspection that allowed me to reconnect with the person I had once been. Slowly, the tumultuous emotions that had defined my existence began to settle into something more manageable, a blend of sorrow and hope, of regret and the tentative promise of redemption. Throughout this process, I maintained contact with the few individuals who had remained steadfast in their support, even as others distanced themselves, unwilling or unable to bear witness to the fallout of shattered trust. Their unwavering presence was a lifeline, a constant reminder that I was not alone in my struggle. In the soft glow of their acceptance, I began to see the possibility of rebuilding, not just the broken pieces of my family, but also the fragmented parts of myself that had long been buried under layers of despair. As the months turned into a slow, measured passage of time, I learned to navigate the delicate dance of balancing forgiveness with self-preservation. I came to understand that the process of healing was not about erasing the past but about finding a way to live with it, a way to honor the pain as much as the lessons it had imparted. In the quiet moments of reflection, I discovered that the scars of betrayal, though indelible, could serve as reminders of my strength, of the resilience that had carried me through the darkest of nights. Even now, as I stand at the threshold of a new chapter, I am aware that the journey toward true healing is ongoing, a series of small steps, each one a testament to the transformative power of pain and the enduring capacity for hope. The wounds inflicted by those long-ago transgressions may never fully disappear, but in their place, I have learned to cultivate a deeper understanding of love and forgiveness, one that acknowledges the complexity of human nature and embraces the possibility that, even in the aftermath of betrayal, there is always a chance for renewal. My heart, though battered and scarred, beats with a quiet determination, a promise to continue seeking light even in the darkest of times. In the end, the struggle to reconcile the past with the present has become not a tale of endless regret, but rather a story of resilience, a testament to the idea that even the deepest wounds can eventually give way to the seeds of growth and transformation. I now carry with me the bittersweet understanding that every act of betrayal, every painful revelation, has also been an opportunity to learn, to evolve, and ultimately, to reclaim the narrative of my own life. And so, as I move forward into the uncertain promise of tomorrow, I do so with a heart that is both tender and unyielding, a heart that has been broken, yes, but one that continues to beat with the stubborn, irrevocable desire to love again. I was beginning to see that the wounds of the past, no matter how deeply they were carved into my heart, could also serve as a guide, an unmistakable map leading me toward a future that was entirely my own. The journey had been long, and every step had come at a cost, but slowly I discovered that the fragments of my shattered life could be painstakingly reassembled into something unexpectedly beautiful. In the months that followed, I found solace in the quiet rhythms of everyday existence. The familiar hum of morning coffee brewing, the gentle chatter of neighbors as they passed by on the street, even the sound of rain tapping steadily against the window, each became a reminder that life, despite all its unpredictable storms, was still full of moments worth cherishing. The days were no longer measured solely by the depth of my sorrow but by the emerging strength that each new sunrise bestowed upon me. The process of rebuilding was neither swift nor uncomplicated. There were times when the past surged forward in vivid, unwelcome bursts, the memory of whispered secrets in the dark, the piercing gaze of betrayal that had once shattered my trust. In those moments, I had to remind myself that I was no longer that vulnerable soul who had allowed another's misdeeds to define my every thought. I began to take deliberate steps to reclaim my sense of self, revisiting old passions that had long lain dormant, exploring new pursuits that promised a fresh perspective, and even daring to forge new friendships with those who, in their own quiet way, embodied resilience. I gradually realized that forgiveness, in its truest sense, was not about absolving those who had hurt me, but about releasing the hold that those painful memories had on my present. I started to accept that the past, with all its bitterness and regret, was an immutable part of my story, a chapter that, while undeniably painful, also contained the seeds of my transformation. Every moment of anguish had, in retrospect, become a stepping stone toward understanding that healing was less about erasing the scars and more about honoring them as testaments to the trials I had overcome. Daniel and I, though still separated by the chasm of our shattered trust, began to navigate the remnants of our shared history with a tentative, fragile respect. We met occasionally, not to reconcile what was lost, but to acknowledge the part of our lives that had once interwoven so seamlessly. In our sparse conversations, I detected hints of the man he might have been, had he chosen a different path, and in those brief exchanges, I allowed myself a quiet moment of compassion for the flawed human being before me. It was not a reconciliation, nor was it an absolution, but rather an acknowledgement of our mutual fallibility, a recognition that both of us were prisoners of choices made in the grip of our own imperfections. My sister, too, slowly began to confront the inner demons that had driven her to act in ways that were beyond our control. In the silence of long, introspective nights, I found myself reflecting on the intricate tapestry of our relationship, one woven with threads of love, rivalry, shared memories, and the bitter remnants of betrayal. There were days when her visits, though still heavy with remorse, began to feel less like incursions into a space of raw pain and more like tentative steps toward a mutual understanding. The journey toward redemption, I came to realize, was as much about forgiving oneself as it was about seeking forgiveness from others. And so, as much as I yearned for absolution from the wrongs that had been done, I found myself gradually learning to forgive the fractured reflection of my sister in the mirror of our shared past. In the quiet moments of solitude, when the weight of every memory seemed to press upon me like an unyielding force, I found refuge in the simple act of creation. I began to write not only as a cathartic release but as a means of stitching together the scattered pieces of my identity. With each sentence, I reclaimed a part of myself that had long been obscured by the darkness of regret. The pages of my journal transformed into a sanctuary where the echoes of pain mingled with the budding whispers of hope, a testament to the inexorable human capacity for renewal even in the face of the most profound betrayal. Time, as it always does, became the slow, steady healer of the deepest wounds. The relentless march of days softened the raw edges of grief, and gradually, I began to see the contours of a future that held promise beyond the remnants of a broken past. The vibrant colors of autumn leaves, the subtle blush of dawn, the joyful laughter of children playing in the park, all these served as gentle reminders that life was a mosaic of moments, both bitter and sweet, and that I had the power to choose which fragments to cherish. There were still moments, even in the midst of newfound peace, when the past would surge forward unbidden, a familiar song, an old photograph, a word spoken in a tone that evoked memories of betrayal. But now, I greeted these intrusions not with the same fierce despair but with a quiet resilience that had been forged in the fires of my own suffering. I learned to let the memories pass over me like a gentle rain, knowing that each drop carried the potential to nourish the barren soil of my heart. In the final reckoning, I came to understand that the journey of healing was not a solitary endeavor but a collective one. It was a process of embracing the multifaceted nature of love, of accepting that the people we hold dear are often as flawed and vulnerable as we are. The tapestry of our lives, with its interwoven threads of joy and sorrow, was a testament to the indomitable spirit that refuses to be defeated by the weight of its own scars. And so, as I stand here today, with the remnants of betrayal behind me and the promise of tomorrow ahead, I choose to honor every moment, both the painful and the beautiful, as an integral part of the person I have become. In this quiet, determined resolve, I find the courage to continue moving forward, aware that the past will always be a part of me but refusing to let it dictate the shape of my future. Every step I take, every new dawn I embrace, is a tribute to the resilience of the human spirit, a spirit that, despite the darkness it has weathered, continues to seek light in the most unexpected places. And in that unyielding pursuit of hope, I finally learned to believe that even the most shattered of hearts can find a way to love again, not in spite of their scars, but because of them.